Hey everyone, how are you? Okay, we're gonna do that one more time. How's everyone? Great. Well, thank you all for coming. We're so excited and I'm so happy to see this room full because if you know, the market has been very interesting in Ontario, and that's why we started this program, is to make real estate great again and to make sure that agents and investors get excited. And we're really excited to tell you all about Alberta and how you can make money, how your investors can make money, and catch on cash investments. So I'm going to let Jake take over and let you know what we've been up to, and please keep your questions till the end and we'll be happy to answer them.
Hold on, we might have a problem for the people online, so
Okay.
1 second.
No problem.
It's always got to be exciting. Let's see. No, it should work. Nobody online can hear me? Nothing, Agnes? Okay. No. There you go. It's just you. Wait, I gotta bring it back up. Sorry, guys. Wow. Honestly, guys, what a turnout. I'm so excited. First of all, so excited to announce that Keithika, many of you know her, some of you don't, has joined us. She's part of our CMHC MLI team. It was an absolute pleasure to have her get to introduce us and get us started this year. She just recently joined Meta to help us sell this, help work with you guys, because there's so many agents here and I literally can't work any more hours in the day. You guys message me. It's totally insane. Not loud enough now? Okay, that's better. There we go. So it's a new year and hopefully a new start. And I do like that cute quote, making real estate great again. But I like another quote as well. This term here, Fries oder Stirb. It's a German term, and most of you probably have absolutely no idea why I have that on screen right now. But what does it mean? It means sink or swim. Many people here know that term. Or adapt or die. Become relevant or turn into dust. You have to adapt. The current way we've been selling real estate in Ontario is not working. It will work again, but it's not working today. It's not working for the agents, many of you in this room. It's not working for your investors and your clients who want to make money. We have to adapt. We have to be willing to change, and we have to be willing at new opportunities. We have to be willing to look at them and find opportunities that can make money. 90% of all millionaires became so through owning real estate. More money has been made in real estate than in all other industrial investments combined. The wise young man or wage earner of today invests his money in real estate. And I didn't write this quote, although I wish I could take credit for it. It's Andrew Carnegie who wrote this quote. Many of you probably know him. He's a billionaire. Half of downtown New York is named after the guy, Carnegie Steel. So I always like to start this presentation off by asking, how many of you guys here have invested in real estate? I know I have. I'd expect more hands in a room filled with real estate investors. Okay. And how many of you guys have made yourselves millionaires investing in real estate? Fewer hands, right? Not as many. So the question is, if real estate is the way to become a millionaire, how come some of you guys haven't been able to do it? Why? And my answer to that is, you've been taught wrong your entire life. From the day you were born, from the day you sat at the kitchen table with your family and learned about how financing and investment worked, you were taught completely wrong. You were taught, save up your money, buy a house, pay down your mortgage, the American dream, the Canadian dream, right? But that is not how you build wealth. Buying a single condo, buying a single townhouse, that is how you save up a nest egg for retirement or for your kid to go to U of T or something like that. Building wealth requires a completely different way of thinking. And right or wrong, society does not tell 99% of people how to do that. But today, that's what we're going to talk about, is using creative financing, using available government incentives and programs to build wealth, not to build a nest egg, not to save up a little bit for retirement, but to build actual wealth that can change your life. So let's just recap what's happened since last year. Since last year, since about August, Q4 of last year, we sold over $200 million of CMHC MLI Select product. That's over $2 million of cash flow for those investors, and approximately 450 houses, of which around 70 of those are affordable homes, affordable rentals. So not only are we making people rich, the agents are making money, the investors are making huge cash flow, and we're kind of helping solve the housing crisis at the same time. We're literally helping this country because the Canadian housing crisis is one of the worst epidemics in the planet. If you look up the numbers, our number of heads per new home built is one of the lowest in the world. And some investors here might be wondering why I'm putting up agent commissions in a room filled with investors, right? Shouldn't we hide commissions? Shouldn't we be scared of that? You shouldn't be scared of making money when you're making your client money. In the world of commercial real estate, clients are happy when their consultants make money because everyone's making money. You should be proud if you generated $2 million of cash flow for your buyers. And we did that using CMHC MLI Select and MLI Select alone, all in Alberta. So what is it, right? Let's give a quick overview on CMHC. Most people probably know that in this room. It's the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation. It's essentially a federal program. If you really distill it down, it's a federal program that provides financing solutions to encourage housing. That's their only goal. Get housing, all types, get housing in the hands of the people. And they do that with the creative financing solutions to help the buyers. Nothing else. So CMHC has been in the news a lot last year. Back in September, they announced the $1.5 million expansion and 30-year amortizations, meaning that for individual personal buyers looking to buy a house, a townhome, etc., that used to be limited to $1 million. They expanded it to 1.5 to help make home buying more accessible, meaning that you can buy up to, $1.5 million home with a 90-10 loan and a 30-year mortgage. It's, as they say, the boldest reform in decades. And all those rules are coming into effect right around now. They also announced, and Daniel Folk, good friend of mine, most active guy on Instagram I know. I'm nowhere near as cool as him, but they also announced a new program for 4-unit buildings where they will do up to $2 million starting, it's today actually. I didn't realize that, where they will do $2 million financing for 4plexes, up to 90% loan to value with 30-year mortgages. Again, a great program to help incentivize people to buy or build, renovate, small kind of infill opportunities, maybe a garden suite or add a basement and an upstairs suite for a rental property. But that's not actually what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about their other division. CMHC, everything we've talked about so far has been on their kind of residential, personal lending side. CMHC also has a commercial lending side. And their commercial lending side is basically just federally mandated to help build or buy apartment buildings, multiplexes. At the end of the day, the goal is build more apartment buildings or take old apartment buildings, buy them, renovate them, make them more habitable, better for people to live in. So what they do is they provide mortgage loan insurance. They are not the lender themselves. They provide insurance so that lenders want to give you these crazy loans for multi-unit developments. And a multiplex or a multi-unit development is any building that is 5 or more units under one title, right? So many people here probably are thinking of like tall, skinny apartment building in downtown or like a mid-rise building. It does not need to look like a traditional apartment building. As long as it's 5 units on one title in one place, they call it a multiplex. But this is the government, this is Canada, and of course, if they're going to give you these awesome loans, which we're going to talk about in a minute, they want their little piece of social responsibility back, right? And they essentially ask you to do some nice things, either to make some affordable units or offer accessibility or energy efficiency or things like that. So how do you qualify a project for this program, MLI Select? And MLI Select is kind of the top tier where you get the best incentives and everything along with it. Real complicated chart. Now, you don't need to memorize this. It's on CMHC's website. So don't take a picture of it on our crappy projector that barely will come through. You can literally type into Google CMHC MLI Select, and the very first page that comes up will have this chart. Make sure you look carefully because there's 2 different charts. There's one for new buildings and there's one for resale buildings. This is for new buildings. But the high and low is you get points, right? If you have 10% affordable units, you get 50 points. If you have 25%, you get 100 points. Same thing for the energy efficiency and the accessibility. You don't really need to know what all that means, but essentially what we're looking at primarily is the affordability categories. What happens with these points is that you get the goodies the more points you have. Our goal, your goal, whether you work with us or do this yourself, whatever, is to always get 100 points because it gets you the best incentives, which are well worth it. First of all, the craziest thing on the planet is they will finance up to 95% of the cost of your building, meaning that you only need 5%. Very important I say up to, and we'll discuss later why it's up to and not always, but essentially you can buy or build an apartment building with only 5% in the deal. They will also give you a 50-year amortization on your loan, not 1550, 50-year amortization. They want this thing to cash flow. They want you to be able to pay your bills every month. So they spread out those payments over an extremely long period of time so that it is possible to be cash flow positive. They also limit your personal exposure. When you get a mortgage on your house or on a condo or on a townhome or whatever, you are on the hook for that whole mortgage, right? If you screw up, if you don't make your payments, obviously they'll try to sell the house, but then they're coming after you and the bank will happily destroy your whole life. With these loans, you have limited exposure because it's commercial lending. They're not going to come to you for the whole chunk of change, right? They're going to keep you on the hook for a little bit, but they're not exposing you to everything. So let's talk a little bit about those requirements and what they mean, because I hear this all the time, especially with this category, affordability. People get their backs up. They get a little nervous because they don't understand what it really means. They're thinking of Regent Park. They're thinking of Toronto Community Housing. They're thinking of really bad tenants that are smoking crack in their units and making meth labs and that kind of stuff. That is not what affordability means to the CMHC program. You have to include affordable units, but all that it means is that they are at or below a certain rent. So what does it mean? It means that CMHC goes and does a survey of every major city in the country and every neighborhood in those cities, and they calculate what the average income is, and from that, they calculate a ceiling rent. For example, in Edmonton, it is $1,650 per month. In Calgary, it's $1,740 per month. And then all you have to do is rent some of your units at or below that rent, right? It's not, they're still market units. You're still picking the tenants. You're still going through, checking their credit, doing all that other stuff. These are not tenants that are being like low-income housing tenants being picked by the government for you. It's just that the maximum they can charge is $1,650 or $1,740 or whatever the rent is in that community. But that they don't really talk to what type of unit it is or where it is. So how do we get around sort of losing money on those units? Smaller units, higher other fees, putting those units in the basement, facing the garbage room, that kind of thing, right? So what we do when we engineer these buildings is we are not actually even losing money on those affordable units. We're making them the less desirable units in the building. As long as we're able to provide any unit at or below those numbers, CMHC is happy. They don't say it has to be a penthouse unit with marble floors and gold toilets, right? So that's how we work around that. And at the end of the day, if someone's getting an affordable unit, they should just be happy. They're still getting a warm, safe, clean place to sleep, right? On that point of auxiliary fees, they do not speak about anything other than the unit itself. Parking, you can charge more on your affordable unit. Pets fees, other things that would be extra charges. They can be at a higher price on that affordable unit as long as your base rent is under that number. And that's how we get around that stuff. In terms of energy efficiency, you don't really need to know anything about this kind of stuff. All that you need to know is if you decide to build a building that has points from energy efficiency or from accessibility for that matter, you simply tell your architect and they'll hire the right consultants to hit those numbers and they'll tell you how much it's going to cost. The reason I don't dwell on these two categories is because I also don't ask the architect why he wanted the concrete slab to be 7 inches thick or 5 inches thick. You say it needs to be and you do it, right? So if you're taking points from these categories, they know, the consultants know what you need to add to the building, whether that's thicker insulation or higher end windows or a better boiler or furnace, et cetera, et cetera. They will simply spec the building that way. And when you apply to CMHC, you'll have the consultant letter with the stamp and the signature saying you meet the requirements. I'm not an energy consultant. I don't know what a better window is or a worse window. I just know if you spend money on a better window, you get the points. And that's all you really need to know. The key is what we're looking at and what we're going to get into deeper in this presentation is really utilizing that affordability component to make this stuff work. We focus on affordability, as I said. I ruined my next slide. I talked too much. So what is it that you really get? There's a lot more benefits that I even initially discussed. Just to recap, you're getting up to a 50-year loan. You're getting up to 95% financing, meaning that you only need 5% down. One thing we did not yet discuss is because this is insured lending, you're getting below prime interest rates. CMHC is probably offering the cheapest fixed mortgage rates on the planet. I mean, I can't guarantee that, but I can certainly guarantee that the cheapest in North America. Depending on the size of your loan, you're looking at the 5 or 10-year mortgage bond plus half a point up to 1%, depending on the size of the loan. So to put that in real numbers, that means that you're getting money right now between about 3.6, 3.7, up to around 4.2%, depending on the lender and how much they like the application. But I want to be very clear. You're getting that money for up to 10 years. You can lock that rate in for 10 years, not 5 years. You can do 5 if you want, but anyone sane will do a 10-year loan. And the reason is because if you paper this and it makes money on day one, then you don't have to worry for 10 years. Put it in perspective. What were the rates in 2020? 2020, CMHC was lending at 1.9% for 10-year money. Think about that. What were the rates in 2023? 7.5%? Something like that. I can't remember. Something like 7.5%. So the guys who bought apartment buildings in 2020, were they worried? No. They're only halfway through their term, guys. It's the beginning of 2025. They're still getting 1.9% for 5 more years. By then, the building's probably 3 times its value, and how much mortgage have they paid off, right? So you're able to lock in 10-year money at below prime rates. You can sleep well at night for a good portion of your life while you're cash flowing every single month. And this basically means that you're getting guaranteed high returns and positive cash flow on every CMHC MLI project that you do. How can it be guaranteed? Because guaranteeing things is a very, excuse my language, a very fucking strong word to use, right? Like guarantee is a serious piece of language. It comes with legal repercussions and other things like that. The reason is because CMHC is not going to approve your loan unless it's going to be cash flow positive. They have specific requirements on the ability to service the mortgage. This line right here that says 110% of costs, that's called the debt service coverage ratio. Debt service coverage ratio means that essentially it's how much cash flow you have after paying all the expenses, which is called your net operating income. It's how much higher that is than the mortgage costs. So if your mortgage is $100 a month, the minimum operational income your building can have is 110, or else they're not going to give you the loan. But only a completely crazy person would submit a proposal at 110, because if you're off by even 0.1%, they're going to deny you. Any of the projects we look at, we're aiming for as high as possible. This is actually a typo. It should say 114 to 140 plus. Not a lot of projects are going to be 140 plus. I'll give Agnes shit for that later. But we are looking for a minimum of 5% over that minimum threshold. The reason being because I care about clients and I don't want to sleep poorly at night. So I know that if there's at least 5% higher than the minimum, the odds they run into cash flow problems are extremely low. And if you look at a lot of the projects we're looking at, they're closer to 120. Some of them are even higher than 120, because that gives you a lot of safety. If rents change, if vacancy rates change, if interest rates change, if I'm wrong and I made a typo, you have a lot of safety with that extra buffer in there. But what it means, again, CMHC is not going to approve your lending unless they strongly believe that you can get that debt service coverage easily. And when we submit a proposal to them, they analyze everything themselves. They have their own quarterly rental surveys that covers what are the rents in those neighborhoods for newer buildings, older buildings. It covers what are the property taxes, the property management fees, the other costs associated with the building. And we can't just make up any numbers, because if they say, let's say the rent of this unit should be 1,000 and we put 3,000, they're going to laugh us out of the room, right? So we have to be within those ranges. A lot of the time, we're actually forced to put lower numbers in our packages because we know what CMHC wants to see. For example, in most of Edmonton, a 1,300 square foot 3-bedroom unit would rent at around 2,600 to 2,700. CMHC wants to see 2,200 to 2,300. So even though we know we can get 2,600, 2,700, I have leases in hand signed over the last few months at 2,600, 2,700. We put 2,200 or 2,300 in our proposal, because if I put 2,700 in, CMHC is going to get upset with us make it a lot harder to get approvals or add terms and conditions on the loan that we don't want to see. And since it doesn't matter, no one's forcing you to rent it at 2,300. That's just what we use. And if it cash flows at 2,300, then you'll be loving us when you actually get 26 or 2,700 for the unit. So you guys should do what I do and leverage government-backed financing to maximize your investment. You know, like, why would you swim upstream in such a challenging real estate market when you can swim with the current and basically just make money? And exactly what I just said, what I do, I bought a CMHC MLI in November, and I'm currently in contract on another building that I just signed today in downtown Edmonton as well. So what do we do, right? Because this program sounds like if it's so good to be true, why isn't everyone and their brother and their sister and their mom and their dad doing it? Well, funnily enough, it actually is getting to that point. CMHC has had so much lending over the last 6 months, they're kind of freaking out because they've never had this program used so much before. But the real reason that not everyone is doing it is because if you draw a circle of people who want to be landlords, and if you draw a circle of people who want to be builders, there's not a lot of overlap there. Because most people in this room who are either a realtor or a real estate investor or both, they don't want to be a builder. Being a builder, there are builders in this room and they know how much of a pain it is. So, I mean, you start from the fact that you have to pick the right piece of land, get that wrong and you're already done. Then you have to go to the city and battle them to get your approvals and actually design something that A, makes sense to meet the city's requirements and makes sense to reach CMHC's requirements. And those might not be the same things, right? We know municipalities and federal governments don't talk very often. But then you actually have to build it. Don't forget that you have to build it. And if you're not a builder, how are you going to do that? Because the trades can smell blood in the water like a shark. So if you don't know what you're doing, they're going to rip you off. They're going to take advantage of you. They're going to overcharge you. They're going to not finish on time. You're going to get absolutely killed. And even if you don't get killed, who wants to do that? The reason you want to be a landlord is because it's mostly a passive job, right? You want to sit at home and collect money, have this thing property managed, not do a full 9-to-5 job managing people on a site, telling them where to put nails and screws and stuff like that. So what we realized back in August was there was an opportunity, because my background is in pre-construction sales combined with commercial real estate. And we kind of had a light bulb moment where we said, why can't we sell CMHCs the way we used to sell pre-construction, where we would meet with the builders, we find the land, we find the opportunities, we get everything approved, we design the product to maximize the program, to minimize the costs, maximize the rents and the net operating incomes. We design the buildings to be happy with the city, where we're not battling them for years to get approvals. And then we price it in a way that makes sense on a fixed price contract. We handle the CMHC application with the top brokers in the country to ensure we get the best terms and conditions with the lenders. And then once it's actually built, we have the property manager that's going to lease it up, stabilize it, and then run it for you for the rest of the time so that you don't have to do anything except, you know, occasionally meet with them and your accountant to do your year end and that sort of thing. And that's what we've done. We've basically created a vertically integrated turnkey experience for buyers to purchase CMHC MLI buildings in Alberta primarily, anything from 5 plexes up to 100+ unit buildings, whatever the heart desires. So how do you actually qualify for this program? What do you need to do, right? Because going back to the very beginning here, when I said that, you know, society has kind of lied to you about how to save money, how to invest. People probably in this room say, I can't afford a multiplex. That's expensive. I don't make enough money. I can't do it. The bank's not going to give me the money. Well, what you probably don't realize is whether you use CMHC or whether you just go get a regular commercial loan, it's actually easier to buy a multiplex than a single unit. And the reason is because when you buy a single condo or a single townhome or whatever it is, or even a duplex, they care about your income. And obviously they're going to look at your loan you have on your house. They're going to look at the loan you have on your cottage. They're going to see how much you pay in taxes, how much you pay on your car payments. And they're going to go, oh, this guy can't afford a condo as an investment. He doesn't make enough money. But when you buy multiplexes, they don't give a shit about your personal income. They don't care if your T4 is 0, because instead of qualifying the building off of your income, they're qualifying the building off of its income. Remember the debt service ratio, right? The net operating income. That is what they care about. Because how could anyone ever buy a 100-unit apartment building if they needed to use their personal income? $30 million. No one's going to qualify. They care that the building can safely pay for itself on a monthly basis with a healthy safety margin in case rents drop or vacancies go up, that kind of thing. All they care about from you as the buyer is that you have the cash. And because these loans go up to 95% loan to value, you don't really need a lot of it. Deposits, between 5 and 10%. And that, as I will explain later, just depends on the project and the numbers and that kind of thing. But many of our deals easily hit 5%. They want to know that you have an additional 10% liquidity. They count liquidity as cash, obviously, stocks and bonds, not in an RSP. They want access to it, right? So if you just have a bunch of stocks sitting in a trading account, that sort of thing, or lines of credit. So if you have a line of credit for $400,000 against your house, that's liquidity. And they want to see that you have a total net worth of about 25% of the whole project. So let's put that in real numbers to show you how accessible a program like this is. And I'll use an example that we're actually going to look at later, the most entry-level sort of multiplex you can buy, which is a 5-plex in Edmonton. We can sell you at a 5-plex in Edmonton for approximately $1.5 million, $1.5 million. And again, you're probably saying, holy shit, how can I buy that? You only need $75,000 for a deposit. You can't buy a condo in Toronto with $75,000. What would that get you? $370,000 condo? You can't buy a condo in Toronto. But with that same deposit, you can buy a $1.5 million multiplex. In terms of liquidity, you just have to be able to show an additional $150,000. Not in cash. It can be a combination of cash, stocks, bonds, line of credit, and a total net worth of 25% of the project, which is what, 375, 400K? So it kind of naturally works out. If someone has $75,000 laying around and they have another $150,000, $200,000 in liquid assets, they probably have a total net worth of around $400,000. Because if you have $1 million house with a $500,000 mortgage, congratulations, you can afford this, right? As long as you have some cash sitting around. If you don't have the cash, nothing really to. But what's amazing about this stuff is that in commercial lending as well, which I did not mention up here, is this does not impact your credit. It does not impact your ability to buy other properties. This will not show up on your credit score at all because the property is the security, not you. Meaning that you could go out and buy a 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, $50 million MLI tomorrow, and the very next day you can walk into your bank and say, I want to buy a house. They won't give a shit that you bought this. They won't even know that you bought this, as long as you can still qualify for your house, obviously, right? But a lot of investors in this room, I'm sure, bought a lot of condos or a lot of townhomes over the last 10 years. And back a few years ago, they started really cracking down on how many mortgages they would give you, right? They don't like giving out more than 4 or 5 personal mortgages anymore. Doesn't matter how much money you make. I hear about guys that make $1 million a year and they can't get past 5 or 6 mortgages because the bank just doesn't do that on the personal side. CMHC MLI, there's no cap. I mean, there is, but like when you get into like billions, they start to worry a little bit. But for most people in this room, including myself, the 1 or 2 or 3 deals you do, they're not even going to blink. And again, the personal side, they're not even going to know you bought these properties. It does not impact your credit, does not affect your borrowing power for any other stuff you want to do. They don't check your income. They will run your credit score, not because they're overly concerned. You don't need an 800 to qualify. Anything over a 630, they won't blink an eye. If you're under 630, you're going to have some explaining to do because that's pretty low, okay? If they see that you haven't paid all your bills and you have collections, you have judgments, you haven't paid your taxes, they're going to have some issues. They want to know that you're not a huge liability, a huge risk. But as long as you kind of have a put together picture, you're a responsible adult living their life properly, there's no reason that they will not qualify you as long as you have the equity requirements. And just one quick note on that, Canadian assets. They do not qualify anything out of the country. I don't care if you have a bank account with $100 million in Detroit, which is literally across the border. To them, it's zero. It has to be in Canadian assets. That's the only requirement with this stuff. It's Canadian program, Canadian assets, Canadian citizen, Canadian PR. If you are a foreign buyer, you can simply be a minor shareholder on these things. So you can still do the deals, but there has to be a Canadian counterpart kind of being the front man on these deals. So there's your summary. They're government-backed loans, 95% financing, 50-year amortizations. You can get up to 10-year terms and below prime rates. You have a third-party sanity check from CMHC themselves saying, yeah, this stuff makes sense. And trust me, CMHC is much more interested in saying no than yes, especially these days. And you're getting it at a fixed price construction, just like pre-construction, right? So in the exact same way, you walk into a Tridel sales center or Madison sales center, and you find a 2-bedroom unit you like, and they say it's $800,000, you buy it, you don't have to worry about how much money Tridel or Madison spent buying the land, how many years they spent dealing with the planners, the architects, any of that stuff. Whether they make money on that unit is not even your problem. They will deliver it to you at the end of the day. You know you're going to get a condo for 800K. The same thing here. You don't have to worry about any of the builder's problems. They're just going to deliver your shiny new building after however long they say it takes to build it. So how can you lose, right? I mean, pretty damn good program in my opinion. That's why I bought 2 of them in the last few months. But there's more to this program. And this is where, in my opinion, it gets crazy. Because at the beginning of this, I told you I was going to show you guys how to actually build wealth, not just build a nest egg. And as much as it might be sexy to say I own a 5-plex, 6-plex, even a 10-plex, even a 24-plex, that's not wealth. I'm sorry. That's not private jet money. That's not flying business class whenever you want money. That's still just a nest egg. If you look at landlords that own 100, 200, 300, 5,000, 10,000 doors, which there's many private landlords in this country, I know a lot of them, how did they get there? Did they just make $30 million a year at their day job so they could afford to buy thousands of units? No, they did not. They used programs like this. So CMHC has a program called Pari-Passu lending. That's a Latin term, but it's the actual term they use. They kind of be like doctors, I guess. And what it means is equal footing. What is an equal footing loan? Well, CMHC allows you to refinance your property. Either it can be done during construction or it can even be done like days after the building is complete. But essentially, at the very beginning here, I was very careful in the terminology I used. They lend you 95% loan to cost, not loan to value, loan to cost. Cost and value are not the same thing, right? You can build a building for X dollars. It might be worth 2X. It might be worth 5X. It might be worth 1.2X. What I can tell you is any project we sell you, we have appraisals that are higher than the cost. After your building is done, after your building is stabilized, after you're renting it, and you can go back to the bank and say, check it out. I beat my numbers. I said it was going to be $2,200 a month for this 3-bedroom. It's $2,600 a month. I said the property tax was going to be $10,000. It's actually $8,000. I'm making $17,000 more net operating income than I said I was going to make. Whatever the story is, you get your appraiser to go in there and say, yeah, they paid $1.5 million, but I'm thinking this appraisal is worth 1.7, 1.8. CMHC will allow you to refinance up to 95% loan to value. Now it's value, not cost, meaning that as long as the cash flow can support it, you're still going to be limited by that 10% coverage. As long as the cash flow can support it, you can pull out all of your equity from that building, right? Obviously, again, as I said, the cash flow has to be able to support it. If your rents aren't doing well or something, it won't happen. But generally, the way we do these buildings, we leave a lot of fat in those deals so that this can happen. What does it mean if you can pull out all your equity? You get your whole deposit back within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It means you can go buy another one. And then you can do that again. And you can buy another one. And you can buy another one. And you can buy another one. How do you think those guys got 100 doors, 500 doors, 10,000 doors? As I said, they weren't Toronto Raptors. They weren't making $30 million a year. They bought buildings. They got the value up. They pulled out the money. They bought more buildings. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The only difference between a guy with 200 doors and 2,000 doors is how hungry he is. It has nothing to do with how much money he makes. It has to do with what makes him happy. Because if you own 200 doors, you're probably cash flowing $1.5 to $2 million a year. So are you happy? Or do you need the hunger to go to 2,000 doors? But it is very easy, obviously dependent on interest rates and economic conditions, but generally very easy if you start with a 6-plex, an 8-plex, a 10-plex, and if you're willing to be aggressive with your refinancing, that over a 10-year period, any person in this room that can afford the first 6-plex could be at 50 to 100 doors within 10 years without spending a single dollar more than their original down payment on the first unit. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to use a friend's name. Hopefully it doesn't get back to him, but you can look up Panoramic Properties. They're out of Niagara region. They're one of the largest private landlords in the country. The owner's name is Angelo Butera. He's a good family friend of mine. He came to this country in the 1970s with a grade 7 education from Italy, barely speak English, never got past a grade 7 education. He worked as a concrete former, saved up a little money, saved up a little more, realized that he could buy a rundown shitty apartment building and using his own construction knowledge, renovate it, fix it up a bit, get the appraisal up, refinance it, buy another building. You guess how much property he owns today? Was it 40 years later, 50 years later? He owns $3.2 billion of real estate across mostly Niagara region and up in Sudbury. Say it again. He never had more than a grade 7 education. He came to this country barely able to speak English. Not a genius, didn't go to Yale, doesn't have an MBA, certainly never made $30 million a year, but he turned a sixplex investment into $3.2 billion by refinancing. And back then, they didn't have 5% down MLI programs. If anything, we're playing the game with cheat codes right now, right? So when I said at the beginning of this that you can use programs like this to build wealth, it's not about one sixplex or one 10plex. It's about building wealth. It's about getting buildings, getting the equity out, buying more. And that is what they don't teach you in grade 10 finance or home economics. They teach you to pay off your mortgage. You know how many people I talk to every week that say, can I prepay the mortgage if I want? Can I pay it down early so I get more cash flow? What are you going to do? Even if you paid off the whole mortgage on a 5plex, it's going to cash flow like $50,000 a year if you paid it off. But now you've got $1.5 million sitting there doing nothing for $50,000 a year. That's shit. You can keep pulling that money out, turning it over, and in 10 years have 100 doors. Even at a highly leveraged state, that 100 doors is going to be cash flowing you 200, 300, 400K. Now you're talking. $400,000 is probably more money than most people in this room will ever make. Not to be rude, but it is. Statistically, it puts you in the 1% of the 1%, right? That is what they don't teach you. And that is the major advantage of this program, is when they let you pull that equity, you're not doing it as a second loan at 8, 9, 10% interest. You're doing it with equal footing at the same low interest rates. And people say this is crazy. Why would CMHC let you do this? It's very simple. CMHC's goal is to get housing built. Every time they get a new application, it's a huge risk for them because they don't know, no offense, Keithika's never submitted to CMHC before, and they take her application. What if she screws everything up? They're taking a gamble, right? Because then she goes into default, power of sale, it's a huge burden. But if Keithika's done one of these and it's running perfectly, wouldn't they rather give her more money to go build more, right? She's no longer a risk. They want you to be able to refinance. They want you to be able to build more because you're less of a risk if you've already done it and shown you didn't screw it up. So it basically means, I kind of talked and didn't push the next slide. You can own an apartment building with $0. You know, it might not happen on day one, but the best deals I have, get your equity out 3, 4, 5 months. The worst deals, probably 18 months. But either way, you can end up free rolling in an apartment building if conditions are right. And let's say the conditions aren't right for a year or two. Mortgage rates go up or appraisals drop in the short term or whatever. Who cares? You still have a cash flow positive asset. Cash flow is king, right? How many people bought real estate in Toronto over the last few years hoping for appreciation and they're getting absolutely crushed right now? Who cares if it goes up in value if you're cash flowing? It's all a bonus. I mean, it likely will over time. Real estate statistically has appreciated for the last 30, 40 years. But as long as you're cash flowing, you can ride it out for a year or two without crying, right? And then as soon as you end up in that positive market condition, you get that equity out. It's playing the game with cheat codes. Literally is. Grade 7 education is becoming billionaires because they refinance. It's playing the game with cheat codes. And it's especially cheat codes when you're using the government's money to do it. And my favorite part, at least, is I hate the government. I rant on Instagram every day about how bad I think they are. And they've been, bending me over on taxes for the last 20 years of my life. So I might as well get something for it. And this is literally because healthcare barely works. This is about the only government program that I actually get something from in this entire country. So you might as well use it, right? So let's talk about why Alberta is the place to do this stuff, because this is a federal program. You can do it anywhere in the country. You can do this in Nunavut. You can do it in PEI. You can do it in St. John's, Newfoundland. In fact, we're actually looking at St. John, Newfoundland now as well. But why is Alberta the hot spot? I'm sure you guys have heard Alberta, Alberta, Alberta. There's a couple reasons. The first thing is there's a high freaking demand for housing in Alberta. Alberta has 4% population growth, which is the fastest in the country. It's the highest interprovincial migration in the country. And if you think about why, it's not an oil boom or anything like that. It's because Alberta has the only 2 cities in Canada that are big cities where you can get that big city lifestyle that aren't ridiculously overpriced, right? Your dollar goes a lot farther in Alberta. You can get out of the expense of Vancouver, get out of the expense of Toronto, and still live in a town with 1.2, 1.3 million people. There's still theaters, bars, restaurants, all the things you want. You're not moving to Winnipeg, where there's nothing but mosquitoes. They have huge investment coming in technology. So Alberta has some of the lowest corporate taxes in the country, the lowest regulations in the country, and the big players in the game know that. There's a 53% surge in tech employment in Alberta. Recently announced a couple weeks ago was the world's largest AI data center, a $70 billion project coming to Edmonton. It's actually being pushed by Kevin O'Leary, but it's a done deal. It's happening. It's going to employ 5,000 people. Not just that, what do you think is going to power that bad boy? Gas, oil, right? So it's like very easy because you need a shitload of energy to run AI data centers. That's why they're doing it there. So why is it solid gold to do CMHC and MLI in Alberta? There's a lot of reasons. The median renter income in Alberta is extremely high. CMHC calculates the affordable rent, the maximum you can charge on 25% of your units based off of the incomes in those neighborhoods. I was wrong, I said 1650. They actually raised it to 1665 recently in Edmonton. Calgary, 1740. To compare that to Ontario, good chunk of Ontario is at 1,200. How are you going to rent an apartment for $1,200 in the GTA? You're going to get absolutely crushed. Even if you built the building for free, you're not going to cover the freaking property taxes here, right? That is such a high affordable rent level that, as I mentioned earlier, we end up with no penalty because only 25% needs to be affordable. Those are your studios. Those are your basement units. Those are the units facing the garbage chute. As I say, maybe the market rent on a bed basement unit in Edmonton, $1,400, meaning you're at market. You have no penalty. There's also a lot of nothing in terms of costs and municipals. There is no land transfer tax. There is no development charges. There's no municipal hookup charges, no parkland dedications. I don't know, the 30 other things you end up seeing on the back of a condo contract in Ontario do not exist here. Closing costs, sorry? Yeah, exactly. And what I like to say is, you know, we all seen those reports that like in Ontario, 30, 40, maybe even 45% of the cost of a house is taxes and fees. You cannot rent a fee, right? All I can rent is hard space, square footage. So if 30 or 40% of the cost of my house is unrentable, wasted fees, how can I ever end up in a good economic position renting it? In Alberta, probably 90%, 95% of the cost ends up being the actual delivery of the home. So the ratio of rents to cost is substantially better. Not to mention, this doesn't really concern you guys, but from a builder side, the fact that they don't have to go through all this crap, they can just get things built, right? It's just so much easier to do business there. Let's talk about the landlords and the tenants. You know, people say landlord-friendly policies. I don't like that term. I call it sanity. Nothing here is landlord-friendly. It's reasonable. There is no rent control in Alberta. Security deposits are legal. Pet enforcement, fees for pets, all legal. So what does that mean? In Ontario, you can only charge first and last month's rent. In Alberta, you charge a security deposit on top. What is the single biggest repair and maintenance a builder is going to have is unit turnover. Oh, they left picture frame holes in the wall. They dinged the drywall here. They didn't clean the unit. I got to get a cleaner in there, clean up the mold in the bathroom, blah, blah, blah. Spend $400 or $500. Good luck ever collecting that back in Ontario. It's not worth it because tenant's going to tell you to go fuck yourself. And if you take them to the landlord-tenant board, you have to pay $187, and then you got to wait 6 months. And then even if you get a judgment, how are you going to enforce it? How are you going to get the money, right? So you just write it off as cost of business. Well, if you have a $2,000 security deposit, two things happen. Number one, if they leave the unit with problems, you just deduct it. Period. Oh, it cost me $500 to turn over the unit. Who gives a shit? But more importantly is, turns out that when people are accountable, they don't leave the units messed up. They don't leave holes in the wall. They don't leave it dirty, right? Because they want their security deposit back. Pet enforcement. It is illegal in Ontario. We'll take questions at the end. Pet enforcement is illegal in Ontario, right? You can say, I don't want pets in the building, but if someone gets a pet, you can't evict them for it. The only caveat to that would be if the condo corp says you can't have pets, but even then, hard to enforce. But in Alberta, if you say no pets, period. If you say, okay, well, let pets, you can charge for it. You will see in some of our cash flow analysis, if someone wants a pet, $100 a month extra cost because pets come with extra wear and tear. They come with extra disturbance for other tenants, that kind of thing. This is my favorite part because I own 2 apartment buildings in Ontario also, and I have dealt with tenants that keep me awake at night. They shouldn't, but they do. If someone does not pay their rent in Alberta, get out. 14 days. 14 days is the maximum. The maximum. I see most evictions happening 8-9 days. So all of that, when we look at pro formas, we say bad debt and vacancy, and we put a line item for it, depending on the neighborhood, 2, 3, 4, 5%. In Ontario, I don't think we can really do that anymore because one bad tenant, you hear the horror stories. There was one on the news the other day. It took 4 years to get that tenant out, $55,000. That is not 3% bad debt and vacancy. That's like 300% bad debt and vacancy. The worst case scenario in Alberta is if they appeal your eviction, 28 days, still within a month. And to be clear, unlike Ontario, there is no sob stories. There's no I lost my job. There's no, I have a mental health issue and I'm sad I can't go to work. The only valid reason for appeal is that you can actually prove you paid your rent and the landlord's just lying, which obviously you need a way to do that. That is literally, they can say, here's the proof of the rent. It's in the bank account. You get to stay. Otherwise, you're out 14 days. So it's a magic formula, right? You have strict tenant laws. You have low delivery costs. You have favorable financing terms. And that just leads to high cash flows with minimal deposits. It's really a beautiful thing. And like I tell you, I own buildings in Alberta, in Ontario, and I'm buying MLIs in Alberta. And all I'm trying to do now is sell all my Ontario property because I want to use that capital to buy as much MLI as possible while the going's good. So how long will this opportunity last? Like, how long will this exist? We don't even know, because CMHC and MLI has been around for a very long time in various forms. In fact, this program in its various forms goes back to the 1960s, but it ebbs and it flows with the needs of society. We had the baby boomer crisis back then. Now we have the worst housing crisis in history. In response, they made the program the loosest, the juiciest, whatever you want to say that it's ever been, with 5% down, 50-year AMs, all these things. But it's being used a lot. I said they have the last 3 years in a row in the highest CMHC lending in Canadian history, and it's only going up. More applications, more use. And what I'm seeing now is more lenders and more CMHC adjudicators. They're getting kind of nervous. They're just saying, holy crap, there's so many people using this, and they're tightening it up. We see it on every application we submit. They're asking to see stronger buyer profiles with more liquidity, more net worth. They're asking us to put in lower rents or higher vacancies. And most importantly, they've been increasing the spreads on the interest. We've seen a lot of lenders massively increase the spreads over the bond rates, right? So I don't know if everyone knows how fixed mortgages work, but basically you have bonds, right? Mortgage bonds that you can just Google, Canadian mortgage bond, 5-year, 10 years. And then the lender basically gets that money from selling the bonds. They charge a spread, like half a point to a point, and then that's your interest rate. So if the bond is at 3.3 and it's a 1% spread, your interest would be 4.3, right? And that's how they make their money, is that spread. Most lenders used to be at 0.65. There's been so much action in the program. We've seen lots of lenders jump up even to 1.5, 1.8. One thing I'm really proud of is that we actually are working with our own lender. It's an energy company that decided they wanted to get into lending. They got their approval with CMHC a few weeks ago, and we have an exclusive with them guaranteeing us a maximum spread they'll charge us, whether it's a $1 million loan all the way up to a $100 million loan. And we did that because we're proactively trying to care for our clients and avoid them getting big surprises with way higher rates than they expect. But to me, the writing is on the wall that within a year or two, the good is going to be gone, and this program, it will still exist, but the requirements are going to be much higher and the offering is going to be much lower. So we are in that golden zone right now where it's the best it's ever going to be. It's only going to get harder from here over the next 6 months, 8 months, a year. So now is really the time to act. We have no idea when CMHC is going to say no more 5% deals, 10% deals, right? And I just want to clarify something so people don't get freaked out. Once you have your approval, you're good to go for the next 50 years, right? If you're in the system, you're in the system. I'm only talking about how they're going to treat new applications forward. As of now, we're still getting everything done. But I think the writing is on the wall for 5% deals. So get it in now while you still can. Today it works, tomorrow it may not. Don't risk it. Plus, prices are rising. Calgary, Edmonton, they're very hot. Every day we're seeing builders trying to increase the prices of their land. Construction costs are going up. Really, we're kind of in that golden era to do this stuff. So as I say, adapt or die, think or swim. If you're not willing to change how you've been investing in real estate, you will fade into irrelevance and you'll never be able to make a lot of money. Whether you're an investor in this room or whether you're a realtor in this room trying to advise your clients where to put their money, in my opinion, there is no better risk-adjusted return right now than Canadian multiplexes under this program. And that's why I bought a 6-plex in November, and I'm buying 24 units right now, which will give me 30 MLI units all in Edmonton. So it's, sink or swim. It's your choice. So let's look at an example of a project, and then we'll call her and ask questions and stuff like that. This is a 5-plex. We have these for sale right now. We sold 6 of these in about a week because, again, the entry point is so low. You guys don't need to worry about taking pictures. All this stuff is publicly on our Google Drive. If you don't have the links, we can send you the links. Your agent can send you the links. If you're an agent and you don't have the link, I don't even know how you got here in the first place. But we try to produce the most detailed pro formas showing all the real costs, okay? And I caution you because there's other people entering this space, and there's also a lot of other agents that sell these things, and they may not really understand what they're doing. There is a lot of bad deals out there, and you need to be very, very careful, very, very critical. The biggest risk you have is overpaying, okay? There is a lot of builders and realtors who can take advantage of Ontario buyers because everything looks cheap to us relative to Ontario prices. Do your research. Whether you buy this stuff with me or not, just be very cautious, always ask and check your numbers, because I see people advertising projects that I wouldn't touch with a 50-foot pole. I see people proudly announcing sales of projects I rejected 3 weeks earlier and didn't want to sell. We aim to make sure our clients can make money, because it takes me a lot more work to come and do this seminar than to have a happy client refinance and buy a second one, right? So I'm aligned with your interest to make money. And if you overpay, you're going to run into 2 problems. The first problem is if you overpay too much, CMHC is going to laugh you out of the room, and then you're done. They'll never take another application from you again. The other problem is if you overpay a little bit, you're not going to hit anywhere near 95.5. You might end up at 90.10 or even 85.15, because they're only loaning against your debt service coverage, right? Here you'll see this one is 119%. Lots of fat in that deal in case things are a little bit off on the numbers. CMHC is happy when they see numbers like 119. But let's go through the proposal, okay? So one thing we show that a lot of guys won't. When you're in commercial lending, there are bank and broker fees. When you buy a house and you have a mortgage broker, all that stuff is hidden from you. It's built into the cost of the loan. In all commercial lending, the lender charges fees, the broker charges fees. Look at a lot of other guys' proposals, okay? Look at other performers that don't come from Meta. 99% of them will not show you these fees. What we do is we work with the builders, and they let us roll those fees into the cost of the property, because the bank will not allow you to do that. The bank wants those paid out of pocket. So what we do, we add them to the price, and as far as the bank sees, they see that's your agreement price. And then at closing, they rebate you that money so that you're not out of pocket for those costs. You're putting it into that 50-year mortgage, because it's a relatively small amount of money compared to the overall price. It hardly impacts the cash flows. Better to keep the money in your pocket, okay? So this 5-plex in Keswick, Edmonton, not Keswick, Ontario, is 1.455 million. Broker and bank fees are about 36,000, giving you a price just under 1.5. This builder happily does deals with us at 5% down all day, meaning you need about $75,000. And on closing, 24 hours the next day, you're going to get a check back from the builder for about 36,000, so that your net in the deal is approximately 5 on the dot. One other point, these bank and broker fees vary. We account for the worst case scenario. The worst case would be 2.5%. It's often much less, meaning that in the event it's less, you end up ahead. You end up with less than 5% of the deal. You're already getting some of your equity out. CMHC fee, we don't roll in because it's such a minor amount. It's only $1,000 on this deal, right? So I just count that the same as kind of your lawyer fees. CMHC fee is $200 per door on the application. So on a 5 units, it's inconsequential, right? Considering that you're rolling in this, and most of these you'll never end up at 2.5%, you typically end up at 1.5% fees. You still have an extra 1% coming back to you in most cases. We're just counting for the worst case scenario. Then we have our rents. 3 bedrooms. In this building, you have a 3-bedroom upper unit, 4-bedroom upper unit, 2-bedroom basement units, and 1 garden unit. As I mentioned, $2,300, $2,500 for these. Real life rents would probably be $2,600 and $2,800. I have leases in hand in a similar neighborhood signed over the last few months at those numbers. The reason we have lower numbers here, that's what CMHC wants to see. We are trying to avoid you getting any restrictions on your approval, right? CMHC can add terms that make these things less enjoyable. We have only had, the big thing is rental achievement, meaning that they will hold back 20% of your loan. until you actually get it fully rented at the numbers you propose. Of the last 13 applications we had go in, only 2 got rental achievement. The other 11 did not, because we know how to make sure the numbers work. The 2 that got them, one of them, we knew it was because the buyer was not taking our advice and made us put in numbers that don't make sense. The other one didn't make any sense. It just seemed to be a new adjudicator at CMHC. We escalated it to the management and they removed that term because we just said this doesn't make sense. So we're very careful because we are trying to look out for the client's interest. Below, you have your expenses. These are either real world numbers that we can prove to CMHC from a project across the street or down the road, or they're just CMHC benchmark numbers. Property taxes, insurance, utilities are 0 because they're paid for by the tenant. And since this is freehold product, there's no common areas to cover. Repairs and maintenance, management and salaries, other costs, replacement reserve, and vacancy and bad debt. Let's talk about these because your real world expenses will also be lower than what we put in here. And I can explain why. Property taxes and insurance, give or take, are what it'll be. Insurance probably will be a little lower, but we use the CMHC benchmark. But if it's $200 less, it doesn't make a difference, right? Repairs and maintenance should be 0 for the first 5 years you own this building. The reason is because you're getting a 10-year warranty from the Alberta New Home Warranty. So if there's a defect in the building, the builder has to fix it. The main source of repairs and maintenance is not a defect in the building, it's the tenants, right? The tenants, as we said, they leave holes in the wall, they do this, they do that. But you're taking security deposits. So whether they don't do it because of the security deposit or whether you deduct it from their security deposit, you don't actually have any expense. CMHC, being, a federal government company, they don't understand this stuff and they just tick off boxes. So our proposals show that repairs and maintenance on a per unit basis. In reality, it's 0, okay? Management and salaries, that is the maximum you will have because we have a blanket agreement with a property management company that services both Calgary and Edmonton at 5.25% plus $500 a door, which is what that calculates out to. On big projects, I can do even better, or you are more than happy to go and shop around and see if you can get a better deal. But this will be your worst case scenario. Other costs really don't exist, right? Maybe you have to do your end of year accounting, get an accountant for something like this, $1,000. Replacement reserve. So what is a replacement reserve? When you are buying an apartment building, you need to plan for the future. 25, 30, 40 years down the road, you're going to have to put a new roof on the building. You're going to have to replace the HVAC. You're going to have to put new windows, blah, 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 blah. Realistically, on a brand new building, you don't need to start saving for that over the first few years. So if you wanted to, especially if your plan is to exit in 4 or 5 years or refinance, whatever your plan is, you can really pocket that. Even if you don't pocket that, it's not actually an expense. It's money you're putting in a savings account or buying GICs with or something safe with so it can grow, but it's not really money out of your pocket, right? Vacancy and bad debt is what it is. It's, the vacancy rate in Edmonton is around 2. We use 3 to satisfy CMHC. So realistically, at the end of the day, you should be seeing, more like 110,000 in rents and more like 22,000 in expenses. But when you put in the mortgage here, you put in the CMHC premium, which again, if you look at a lot of people's cash flows, they don't add the CMHC premium to the mortgage, make it look better than it is. After all of that, this property, as written, will cash flow around $13,000 a year. We're going, Jake, I'm buying a $1.5 million property. I'm only cash flowing $13,000 a year. That sucks. What a shitty deal. But you have to remember, you're only putting in $75,000. You're not putting in $1.5 million. You're not even putting in $100,000. You're not putting in $200,000. Your cash on cash return here is 17.5%. That's not including principal or anything else. That's just the cash you're making on the cash you put in the door. And I would challenge anyone in this room to show me another place you can place money and make 17% cash on your cash, right? Let's talk about different options. If you buy a GIC, what's the GIC rate today? Like 3.5%, something like that. It's probably the safest thing you can do. It says guaranteed on the first letter. But 3.5%, you don't really get out of bed for that. Government bonds, again, we know they're around the same number, 3.5. Maybe you buy into a public REIT, a Skyline or a Transglobe, change their name to Starlight. Cap REIT right now is on sale. You guys can buy that. 4, 5, maybe 6%, depending on the price you pay. What else? We can do private lending, 10, 11%, getting up there. Private lending comes with all kinds of risks, right? The higher the interest, usually, the more that guy is leveraged, the less chance you have of getting your equity out if something goes wrong, and you don't own the underlying asset. Here, we're looking at 17% cash on cash return, and you own the thing. You own it. You're getting the equity as well, which is what we'll look at here. Here's a projection out 5 years, right? And obviously, the further out into the future you go, the more speculative it becomes. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. 5 years ago was the start of COVID. A lot can happen in 5 years, right? But what I can tell you on year one is this will happen. Because as I said, any project that we offer has at least minimum 10% lift in the appraisal. We won't sell it otherwise because there's supposed to be equity creation for the buyer. That's the whole point of buying pre-construction CMHC. If you want to pay the price of its value, go buy a resale one if you can find them, because they're not easy to find. People don't let these go. This particular project, because we've done 6 of them, they're appraising at 1.64. So actually higher than we put in our projections right now. They're appraising at 1.64. So someone is putting, oops, went the wrong way. Someone is putting in $75,000 and they're getting an appraisal in hand before it's even built up $140,000. So they're making a 200% return on the appraisal value, which means that they can pull up that equity fast and get their money out. But even forget that, right? Forget the appreciation, forget the appraisal. This is for certain, your cash flow and your mortgage pay down. The mortgage pay down is the most certain. That's just a formula. Every year you're paying off principal. Add those up and you're looking at around $22,000. $75,000 in, you're getting back $22,000, even if this never goes up $1 in value. Pretty freaking good to me, right? That's pretty impressive to me, because this is all speculative. Maybe it goes up 5% year 2, year 3. Who knows? It could go up 10%. It could go up 0%. It could go down 2%. But who gives a shit? Because if you're making $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year in your pocket, and you're paying off $9,000, $10,000 of your mortgage, you're making money regardless. And when it does go up, you can pull out that equity. If it happens day 1, you pull it out day 1. If year 2 goes to shit, but year 3 we get an oil boom with Trump and Polyev, and the values go up 20%, get that equity out and more, go buy more, right? Potentially, with just a simple 5% yearly increase, if that can happen, which is nothing crazy. I mean, we've seen way more than that happen in Calgary over the last 5 years. We've seen way more than that happen in Edmonton over the last couple of years. You could potentially see upsides of hundreds of thousands of dollars on only a $75,000 investment. But the worst case scenario over 5 years, if it doesn't go up $1, is that you've pulled out, give or take, $120,000 of cash flow and principal. So the worst case scenario, that it never goes up, it stays flat forever. You're still making money every month. You're still paying down the mortgage every month. You'd have enough equity over that time period to pull out your initial deposit, regardless if it stayed completely flat. One other thing we do that I don't see a lot of other proposals do is we run a sensitivity analysis. Because again, I don't want people losing their money. I don't want people going broke with these kinds of deals. So we look at it, what happens if rates go in different directions? And it's a good thing we do, because as I mentioned, over the last 2 weeks with Trump saying some crazy stuff, he's pushed bonds up quite a bit. Bonds like a month or 2 ago were at 2.8. Now they're up to 3.3. They're going to come back down. And any deal you're buying now, you're not locking the rate today. So it's not really an issue. But the fact is that a lot of lending might be closer to 4.2, or in some really bad scenarios up to 4.5. Guess what? Even at 4.5%, you're still beating the DSCR. You'll still get approved. It's not an issue. We make sure our projects have enough fat to handle crazy things going on in the political environment. Guess what? If rents were down 15%, you're still basically breaking even. You're losing $100 a month at a negative 15% rents. But remember, the rents we're putting in here are lower than the actual rents, and the expenses are higher. So in reality, if I put in the numbers that are based off of leases I see today, you could probably go negative 25% before you ended up cash flow negative. Even if you ended up in this situation, even if rents were where they were, and you were losing $1,200 a year, you're still making $9,000 in principal. You're still up. So that's why I say these are pretty much the safest risk-adjusted assets that you can buy right now, because vacancy rates are low. You know, there was only 2 major cities in Canada that had rental increases in the last report that came out. Does anyone know which 2 cities those are? Yeah. Edmonton and Quebec. Why did Quebec City go up so much? I have no idea. That one, I don't know anything about Quebec. They confuse me, those people. But Calgary went down. Edmonton went up. Edmonton still has decreasing vacancies, still has increasing prices. Edmonton has 2 or 3 more years, hopefully, to get to where Calgary is, right? My kind of theory on this stuff, right or wrong, but I've run this by a lot of people, is that the average Canadian can afford a detached house up to about $700,000. Once a house price goes at or above 700K, most people can't afford it, right? They either need to be trading up through condos and towns to get there or whatever. But the average kind of income of a family, they can buy a $700,000 house. Calgary went crazy because in 2019, you could buy a house there for like 425, 450,000, and every year prices went up 10, 15%. Guess where it stopped? 700,000. The average price of a single family home right now, new construction in Edmonton, is around 500, for a starter house. Meaning that if my theory, which is, again, I'm not a genius or anything, but if my theory is even remotely accurate, there's around $200,000 of potential growth in Edmonton, right? Because the way people are moving now with remote work is that they're just looking for a city that gives them enough of a lifestyle at a price they can afford. So people will continue to drive up the price of housing in Edmonton for the next few years until they get around that 700,000 mark, which is why I think that there's still a year or two more upside available in Edmonton. And we're seeing that. Again, low vacancies, rent's still increasing, whereas Calgary's leveled off, right? So in my opinion, and this is why I'm putting basically all of my extra money into these things, these are about the best decision you can make right now. And almost every government in the world has some program like this, some program to encourage housing. The US has something called DSCR loans. They kind of similar, 90-10, no 95-5. I don't know of any other government anywhere that does crazy stuff like this. Like Canada, we go extreme, baby. 95-5, like it's crazy. You're buying $1.5 million properties with $75,000. So as I say, you can adapt or you can die. You can sit there with your money in your pocket. You can keep losing $1,500 or $2,000 a month on a condo in Toronto, or you can put your money where it actually makes sense, where they encourage business investment. They have low regulations and they want people to put their money, and you combine that with a program that encourages people to invest and gives you incredible financing opportunities. And that's why I'm, in for 30 doors there and can continue to buy. And that's it. That's all I have to say. So if anyone has questions, we can take them. Yes. There's 2 different types of lending you can do with CMHC. I didn't get into that level of detail here because it doesn't fundamentally impact kind of the features. Yeah. So just like in Toronto, if it is like a condo type product, it will be held in trust with the lawyers. If it is a freehold product, it will be held by the builder directly and insured by Alberta New Home Warranty. Yeah, I mean, obviously speak to a lawyer, but generally what we understand it to be is that as long as the majority, usually you'd be buying this in a corporation, right? So as long as the majority shareholders are Canadian, you can have foreign investors in your corporation. They can come up with all the money for deposits and everything else. You just have to kind of have a front man who's Canadian. And just to clarify as well, that foreign investor will not count for any of the net worth or anything, right? So it has to be the Canadian that's going to be sort of backing the deal. Yeah, so that's what I was talking about with the 2 different types of lending. Most of the deals we do are not using the construction lending because it depends on the size of the deal. Most of the smaller ones that most retail size investors are interested in, 5-plex, 8-plexes, 10-plex, the builder will just build it with their own financing and you'll just close with the mortgage like a pre-construction. There are deals we have that are construction lending. Those deals operate a little bit differently. There's advantages and disadvantages. So I don't want to confuse everyone by getting way in the weeds, but the construction lending ones, they will actually convey the land to you at the beginning of the process. And then the builder's essentially building on your land like a general contractor. So you do have a risk the builder could like run out of money or something in that process, but you own the land, you own the rights to the plans, and you have the mortgage. So that loan, in the worst case scenario, you would scramble and find a new builder to finish the project, right? Again, most of the deals we do are just closing loan. They use their own financing. But any of the construction loan deals, we very carefully vet the builder. Again, it's all insured, so your deposits are protected. And the advantage of the construction lending, usually for bigger deals, is you can hide extra expenses and repatriate them to yourself, right? So you can basically mark yourself in that project. You can pull out a lot of your equity during construction by inflating the price, pulling money out. So it's all risk reward. Most deals that most people that are buying 5 plexes, 6 plexes, 10 plexes, they will just be getting a closing mortgage. When we're talking construction draw loans, it's more complicated, and we carefully explain that to that buyer. Which, yeah, oh, sorry, we're screwing up. Keith is supposed to online, so we're supposed to be saying the question so that people can hear. So you got to repeat their questions. What's the question?
Building fixed costs, like construction cost overruns are pretty typical, right? So how are we going to maintain the cost of the building?
Absolutely. So the question was, Keith, you can just repeat it. But the question was, how do we maintain those costs? So as I mentioned, similar to how a Tridel or a Madison or a Menkes builds here, they are budgeting in a reasonable profit and a contingency to complete the project, right? So we don't actually want a builder who wants too little profit, because that's a risk. You want a builder to have a healthy, safe profit margin so that they can always finish the project. Most of these in Alberta, we're not looking at high-rise poured concrete. We're looking at simple wood frame construction. They go up in 6-8 months, right? So it's not so hard to budget. They're tendering ahead of time. They know they have costs. They're locking in those costs with the trades. It's not like Ontario, where it's very risky because some of these projects run 7 years. Most of this stuff, from the day they pick up a raw piece of land through to completion, is within 12 months on these small projects. So nothing's risk-free, but we're working with large builders with proven track records, and these are very short timeline completions. We'll go here and then thereafter. Yeah, the question is there a maximum number of apps? There is no maximum number of apps within anything that the average investor in this room will have a concern with. Put it that way. One of my high net worth guys, who's got about 700 million, finally got hit with slow down a bit at 700 million in mortgages. So generally, if you're like any normal person like us, even if you're looking at up to 100 million in loans, you're not going to be hit with any concerns, and your net worth is not tapped on each, right? So then your net worth has nothing to, as I mentioned, this does not show up on your credit. The personal guarantee component is contractual. So the next lender doesn't even know the first lender has approved you. Correct, on the, because we're doing fixed price contracts. Yeah, I mean, if you want, they'll do a price, they'll do a cost plus contract as well. The builders would love that, right? They'll be like, at the end of the day, I've had people say, "Oh, I look at these plans, I think I could build it cheaper myself." And I say, then go do it. Right? You can go be miserable. Like, the builder deserves to make a reasonable profit if they're delivering this for you turnkey and taking all the risk. And as long as you're making a reasonable profit, you should be happy they're making a profit too, right? That's why they're in business. Question is, do you need a corporation? You do not need a corporation, but I would always recommend holding these in a corporation for 2 reasons. One is liability. When you're owning a multiplex, it's a real business, right? Like, God forbid the building burnt down. You don't want to be personally sued for that, right? You want to isolate that liability. And what I do and what I recommend is every project you own should be in its own corporation. You can do intra-company transfers and loans to move money around, but they should all be isolated. And then the other reason is for tax reasons, obviously. There's a lot of tax advantages to holding this stuff corporate and not personal. Yeah, so the question was 2 parts. The first was, what if you want to, if you do the term and you want to get out of the term early? And the second part was about time constraints around refi. So in terms of the loan, it doesn't have to be 10 years. You can do a 5 or 10 year term, but they only do fixed term loans. When you do a deal with CMHC, you cannot really break the conditions of the deal for the first 10 years because they don't want you using it as like a hack to sell off individual houses or something, right? Because otherwise everyone would just build under CMHC, pinky swear they're going to do rentals, and 3 days later sell off the units. So you are sort of obligated by CMHC to keep it as that property for 10 years. You do not have to keep the property. You can still sell it. You just have to sell it as an apartment building. All CMHC loans are assumable. In fact, as far as I know, they're the only assumable loans you can still get in Canada. So they're actually very attractive for resale, because if you have 48 years left on this term at super low interest, there's a million guys out there that want to assume that loan. As long as they qualify, they can take over the loan. And then if there's upside in that loan, they can Pari-Passu at the new sales price to cover the difference up to 95% if the loan can support it. What was the second question? Is there a timeline on Pari-Passu? There's not a timeline, but it has to be reasonable, right? Like if you go in the very next day, if you say we get an appraisal at $1 million today, and then literally tomorrow you come in with an appraisal at $1.5 million, they're going to have questions. They're going to say, this looks like bullshit, right? So it really just depends on the market. It's not a time specific thing. It's a what seems reasonable. They'd say, why didn't you get an appraisal at 1.5 the first time kind of thing. You can sell it as a land deal or a corporate deal. You could do either. CMHC won't care. They'll still make the new owners qualify. They'll still make the new owner qualify. They don't care about the holding entity. They care about the strength of the actual borrower behind the entity. So it doesn't matter how you do the transaction. No, that's why it's a Pari-Passu loan. It's equal footing, right? So you're going back to CMHC. They're giving you a second mortgage that they don't treat like a second mortgage. That's what they mean by equal footing. They're not the lender, they're the insurer. But because they're insuring your first loan and your second loan, they're treated as one big first loan. Usually it would be with the same lender anyway. You can, well, so your net worth is your net worth, right? Because eventually if you go up corporate, doesn't matter if it's 50 shell corporations in a row, eventually it comes to a shareholder, right? So if there's 200,000 sitting in a corporation and you own the corporation, then you have $200,000. If you're a very large borrower, they'll also do corporate guarantees, but that probably doesn't apply for most people, right? That's when you actually own like a big company that makes a lot of money every year. Kind of, yeah. So what I recommend is, this is obviously much more complicated than a regular pre-construction, and we really want to ensure clients understand what they're buying, and we're learning as we go too, because the first deals we did was just me selling or like a few of my close team, and you get very like in the zone, and then when you go wider, you realize a lot of people have no idea what the heck they're talking about, and it's like we're speaking a different language. So what we prefer to do is if you have qualified clients, we can do one-on-one sessions with them to teach them about the program, answer their questions, because whether I spend 10 hours up here or not, they're going to hit you with questions you don't have the answers to, right? After we meet with you 1 or 2 times, you'll know a lot of the common questions, you'll know what they ask, and then you'll be much more comfortable answering them, right? All I say is if there's something you don't know, please just say, I don't know, I'll find out. Don't just bullshit and answer. Too many people do that, and they create massive problems. Once you think you have someone who's seriously interested, we want to pre-qualify them with our CMHC broker. We do not allow anyone to buy anything without a pre-qualification. Even though all you need is those net worth requirements, unfortunately, I have determined that many people do not actually know their net worth or their liquidity, and they tend to overestimate it substantially, right? So we don't trust anybody anymore. You do a 15-minute pre-qual, then you really know what you can actually afford. It's kind of getting the pain out of the way at the beginning. The other nice thing about it is that our really awesome broker will also explain the whole process of the application, all the fine print, all the scary terms and conditions, right? So you get that stuff out of the way at the beginning, and then you're comfortable. Now it's just sunny ways towards picking something you like. Correct. But again, we're not hooking clients. We're offering them something of value, right? But I would just explain it like, as I said, like you can take the same deposit that's going to buy you something here and lose money every month, and you can buy something that actually makes money and builds equity and is cash flow positive that you don't have to worry about, right? Yes. The builder prices them, and then we work with them to engineer the product if we need to tweak the numbers, right? If we say there's, we can improve the build quality here because you're underpriced, like let's upgrade the finishes or something else, or the other way where we say this is too expensive, how do we value engineer it? Because we have a very narrow margin of price ranges that will work with CMHC. So we don't want to be overpriced, and if we're underpriced, we're kind of just like, why don't we make a better building, right? So it's priced the same way anything else is priced. You have your land costs, you have your construction costs, and you have a profit on top.
We had a question over here of how do we know floor plans information from the builder, and can there be changes?
Yeah, so the answer is we keep them all on our Google Drive. As I mentioned, we have a sheet where we have a live inventory list with links to every single project we have at any time. And can there be changes? The answer is generally yes. The builders are pretty flexible. Should you make changes? Probably not. We've already done all the work to make these the best, right? I have to often remind investors that this is not your house, right? If you want to live in your dream house, then buy the investment property the way we've spec'd it, because that'll make you money to buy your dream house. If you want to start putting gold toilets and marble floors in your rental property, you're going to kill yourself. right? We had a deal. It was a big deal, 5-story building. And for some crazy reason, this guy wanted to turn it into a 4-story building with higher ceilings because he thought it would get him more rent or more resale value. And I'm like, fucking delusional. You're giving up 20 units to have 9-foot ceilings instead of 8-foot ceilings. Like, the renters do not care. The thing that matters is that net operating income. You're paying a fixed price for the land. You're paying a fixed price for your foundation, your underground parking. You want to get as many units on top of that as you can. We talked him off the edge, but he wasn't thinking, for a guy buying a $30 million project, he wasn't thinking logically, right, about that stuff. So you have to really tell your buyers to disconnect their personal wants from what makes the most sense as a rental. Someone very rich once told me, if you want to get rich, you sell to the poor. If you want to be poor, you sell to the rich, right? So stop trying to build some luxury, fancy rental. We're building what is needed by the market. It's basic, it's durable, it will last, and it puts people in houses. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, why is there a difference in each one of the estimated returns? So there's a couple points. The first being that obviously different areas of Edmonton have different costs of land, different builders have different prices, and we can get different rents in different areas. But generally, it's very marginal differences. The reason that the estimated ROI can vary so much is because these are 20 times leveraged, right? Because you're only putting 5% in the deal, your return is 20x. So very, very small changes in the actual like cash flow can have a huge difference in the percentages. I tell people not to get overly caught up in if one shows 19 or one shows 23 or one shows 25, because if you break that down on the estimated cost, the estimated rents, since that's a 20x leverage, it might only be a real difference of like 0.1%, right? 0.1% difference makes a 2% difference in return. And that's within the margin of error. I can't predict that your property tax is going to be exactly 2,900. It could be 2,910, right? So generally, we're just looking to be at least over 15, over 20 if we can make it work. And whether it's 20 or 30, like the real world results are going to vary. That much is actually a very little difference. Yes. Depends on the size of the project. Generally, anything under 10 million will be approved 60 to 90 days. Anything over 10 million, up to like 50, 60 million could take up to 6 months. On anything under 10 million, we do not do deals conditional on financing. The reason is because we have pre-underwritten everything. We've already talked to the appraisers. We know it's going to easily get approved. To clarify, some people have a misunderstanding about the CMHC approval process. It's not that CMHC will deny a project, right? Because the projects meet the requirements. And as long as we're pre-qualifying you and you meet the requirements, like if you're lying to us, I can't help it, right? But if you meet the requirements, they can't just say we're not approving you. The only thing they can do is give a higher or lower ratio. So we tell every single buyer, I have personally never seen an approval come back at less than 91.9, right? Most of the deals we've done, probably 95% of them have been at 95.5. We've had a few that come in at 6% down, 7% down. We had one that came in at 9% down. So every buyer that we work with, we tell them your worst case scenario, 999 out of 1,000 times, your worst case scenario is a 90-10. And that's why you need to have that extra liquidity, have all those other things. Most of the time we'll get to the 95.5, but if you end up at 6% down, are you complaining? Right? 7% down, are you complaining? There's still nowhere else on earth you can get those numbers. And if we end up at 10% down, we just have to show the real rents hit, and in 6 months we'll go refinance it and get you to 95.5 anyway, right? So we always tell every buyer, you got to be prepared for the worst, which is 90-10. But we're rarely, I personally still have never seen a 90-10 approval. My worst was a 9% approval, and again, most of them are at 95.5. But it's not like they can't just say no. Even there was a town, I don't remember the name of the town. My broker was talking about it. It wasn't a deal we did, and it's a town that has like a 25% vacancy rate. And they still did an approval at like 75, 25, right? So they'll never deny it. They'll just put a higher ratio. And they knew it was going to come in higher, and they were trying to negotiate to get it to 80-20, but they ended up settling at 75-25. Yeah, just like any other co-op deal, there's a realtor end of every commission, and we tell you what that is on every deal ahead of time, and then you get a referral agreement from us. Yeah. Correct. Correct. Exactly. Yeah, so it's not really installments because really most of these deals are either 5% down or the worst case are 10% down. Because some builders just want 10% down. Think about it from their perspective. If they're building you 20 houses and they're upgrading them all to be detached legal basement and garden suite or something, if they only have 5% in, you could walk away. Most of the deals we do, as I say, we try to get builders to 5%. So we have some deals that are 5, some are 7.5, some are 10. And every deal we do, we clearly explain what they are. But generally, for the 5% deals, you're putting the whole thing in after you firm up. So we basically do like a lot hold, like 10,000, kind of like pre-con. Then you have your 10-day cooling period. You firm up, balance to 5%. Since it's only 5% in the deal, there's no reason to drag it out. And you need to have that money anyway for CMHC approval, so it's there. If it's a 10% deal, maybe the second 10% is in 2 or 3. The second 5% is in 2 or 3 months. And I'll do Anthony and then I'll grab you. Oh. Yeah, great question. So the question was basically, are these units delivered turnkey and ready to go, right? So you actually can pick that. We spec all of these to be landlord ready, meaning all your appliances, everything is done, right? Usually we even have them spec the blinds and the basic landscaping. Like we're not spending $100,000 on landscaping, but we'll put in the lawn and a fence in the back, that sort of thing. But you as the landlord, the buyer, you can say what you want. If you say, you know what, I think I can get appliances cheaper myself, the builder can reduce the price and you can do it. But we always spec them ready to rent. In terms of your question about the rest of the utilities, so every unit will have its own furnace system so they can control their temperature individually. Generally, we do not individually meter the units. So like if you have, let's say, a typical product like our 5-plex, which is a semi-detached home with legal basements and 1 garden suite, each lot will have its own metering, but not each unit. The reason is because a weird quirk in Edmonton is that individual metering to run the extra service line is very expensive. They charge about $20,000 to add a separate service line and a separate meter. It doesn't make economic sense to spend $20,000 to maybe save $5 or $10 a month. You'll never recover that money. It's still what we do in Edmonton because it's legal is you just split up the bill by the square footage, right? So you tell each tenant, you're 60%, you're 40%. If the bill's $200, you pay $120, you pay $80 at the end of the month. So you still get the separate utilities, but you don't spend $20,000 on meter. That's up to the buyer. We usually spec them with AC, but so the question was, is there AC? Again, these are all whatever you want. We typically spec them with AC. Many of you guys here are not from Alberta. Many homes in Alberta do not have air conditioning because it's more mild there. And even on hot summer days, it's very, very dry. They don't have the humidity. In my opinion, what's AC going to cost? $5,000, $6,000 on the purchase price. You're amortizing that over 50 years. Just put the AC. You'll get more rent for it, right? But these are all things you as a landlord can decide. Yeah, I don't have it right here, but that one, as I mentioned, that is a semi-detached house, okay? Each house has a legal basement suite and then the 2-level upper suite. On that particular one side has a 3-bedroom, one side has a 4-bedroom. You have the 2-bedroom basement suites, and then you have a garden suite on one of the lots, making it a 5-plex. We have, because on that particular one, we can't fit another garden suite. On some other ones, you'll have a second garden suite, and then it'll be a 6-plex. It's 2 lots, but when you buy them together, it becomes one title. After 10 years, yes. Correct. But
Jake,
correct. You're locked in to the affordable rents for 10 years. Basically, when you do this with CMHC, their bargain back is you have 10 years on that program. But again, these rents are below the market and it's still indexed every year, right? So if to next year they say it's 1,700, you go 17. But what I would repeat again is that in Alberta, why this works so well is those basement rents are far below the level. So you have no penalty to those affordable units.
We have a question.
Sure.
They were looking at the Excel documents and they noticed that the larger multiplexes have better cash on cash. Would you recommend, is that a valid statement to say, would you recommend the larger ones are a better return of investment?
Well, I mean, when you get into 100,000 square foot buildings, there's economies of scale, right? Like anything else. If a guy's building a 150 unit building, he's going to get everything cheaper. He's going to pay less for his toilets. He's going to pay less for his flooring. So absolutely, if you can afford to spend the money, you should be buying a 100 unit building, but not everyone can afford a 100 unit building. The other downside of the larger buildings is they're much longer time periods. To build a 5-story building is typically 24 to 30 months, whereas you can buy little 10 plexes, 15 plexes, whatever, 6 to 10 month delivery. I think it depends more on your personal financial situation, right? Like, that's why I would always say, talk to like knowing that you can at least qualify for something, because obviously I'm not saying you, but if someone doesn't have any money, there's no point in having the conversation. But talk to the broker that we have. He'll give you what you can safely qualify for. And then I usually tell people, don't buy to your max, buy 80% of it, because why stress yourself, right? Like if in making that investment makes you stay awake at night, you bought more than you should. Yeah. It depends on your borrowing strength. It's kind of funny. The better your portfolio, the better you look as a borrower, the lower they ask you for. The weaker you look as a borrower, the more they ask you for. So they theoretically, the lender can request up to 100% exposure if you're doing construction draws. But once it's stabilized, it will typically drop to between 25 and 40% exposure. Correct. But I like to explain to people, remember, when you buy an investment yourself, you're 100% exposed, right? And since we're appraising these things at least 10 or 15% up, the beautiful thing about Canada is we have power of sale. We do not have foreclosure. In the States, they can absolutely hose you, because with foreclosure in the US, a bank can simply sell it to cover their mortgage. Property can be worth $1 million. If the mortgage is 200, they can sell it for 200. You lose 800,000. In Canada, they are legally obligated to try and get fair market value. So if it's really worth enough, you likely will have no personal exposure. You're the last guy to come to, right? So if you're buying it for 1.5 and your mortgage is only 1.42, and you somehow went into default, which shouldn't happen, then the bank's going to try and sell it for at least 1.5. But if you have an appraisal of 1.6, they have to try to sell for 1.6. You might actually still make profit, right? So that's the nice thing. Canada's a little safer. So like it would have to be a major screw up. And then the other question would be, how would you ever end up in a situation where you end up in default? Because even in a worst case scenario, maybe you're losing your negative cash flow a couple $1,000s a year max. You're not going to be negative cash flow $100,000. You're negative cash flow $5,000 a year. Why would you default that property? It doesn't make sense, right? You beg, borrow, and steal to find the $5,000, because even at negative $5,000, you're still making money on the principal. Sorry, Anthony, you had a question. I know. Ask. You refinance it with any lender, but generally you would, at that point, remember, 10 years from now, what was a property worth 10 years ago versus today, right? You have a whole lot of options at that point. The term is up, but it's like a normal mortgage. What happens after your normal mortgage is up after 5 years? Wait, you can automatically renew, or you can go out to the market and refinance. Correct. No, but we're going to get you the cheapest money we can. And the reason we've got this vertical integration is because these guys are giving us the lowest bond spread on small. So what's happened is CMHC has gotten so popular that a lot of the typical lenders don't want to touch any loans under $3, $4, $5 million, because it's the same amount of work for them to do a $1 million loan as a $5 million loan. They're making so little money off a $1 million loan that they're saying, fine, you want my money? I'm jacking up the interest rates. So what we've done, we're trying to be proactive, is we've secured a new lender who has agreed to work with us on the small projects. Yeah. Correct. We have an inventory sheet with all of our current projects. We update it every single day. Yeah, absolutely. You can combine net worth across multiple people. Oh, God. I don't have it memorized. It's on the floor plan. I'll send you. No, I don't have. I think the upstairs is like 1,700, and then the basement's like 750. Yeah, 1,700. Well, each half is like 2,400. Then you have the garden. So like the 4,800 in the main building, and then maybe like 600 in the garden suite. So call it 5,000 square feet, give or take. 24, 6. No, you're buying the whole thing because you have two, and one. So it's about 5,000 square feet. Again, with the floor plans on the drive, don't ask me to memorize this stuff. Sure. It depends on the project. The quickest ones we have are 4 or 5 months. The longest ones could be 3 years. Every single project in our list has the approximate closing timeline on the sheet. No. They're all pre-construction. Yeah, as I just mentioned, we have ones that are as quick as 4 or 5 months, all the way up to like 3 years. 3 years is going to be like a building, right? 4 or 5 months is going to be like a semi-detached product. And again, our inventory list shows the approximate timeline of closing. Like it'll say 6 to 8 months, 8 to 10 months, whatever it is. These are about 6 to 8 months typically. Some of them, a few of them were quick closing because the builders already started on those ones, right? So like no one can really build a house faster than 6 months. So anything faster than that, they've already started construction. And then most of those, if they haven't started construction, it's like a 6 to 8 months delivery.
What percentage of the properties or the house or the units need to be, the lower rent?
Well, that depends on how you apply the points, but in Alberta, we always go for the 25%. We take all the points from affordable because there's no penalty. So 25% affordable. Since most of the product we sell has an upper and a basement, it works out well because you end up half basements anyway, so you're never hit with the penalty. Sorry, 25. Yeah, out of 5 units, it's 2 units basically. Yeah. But you have 3 units there that meet it anyway because you have the 2 basements in the garden, which are all below. Yeah, it kind of works itself out naturally. No problem. I can send it to you in a minute. Or how did you get here? Okay, got it. I will send you the link in a sec once I hop off. Perfect.
I have 5 condos in the country.
Awesome. Perfect. So you already know Calgary's and
Yeah,
Edmonton, Alberta is awesome.
That's why I said I wanted the
Yeah.
I've been looking for resale there, but this is 100,000. Yeah, the one that you have is 300.
Yeah. If you get into resale, that'll be older buildings for sure, and they'll need cap work, capex, and all that kind of stuff. So, like, definitely, I know guys who do really, really well buying older buildings and then doing value add, right? They renovate and improve them, but that's work. So some people just want a turnkey, no work to do, brand new. They don't have to think about it for 10 years, right? As long as you're making cash flow, if it's either way, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just people, you can definitely make more through value add, but then you have to do all the work. Yeah. Correct. We work with the guy I work with, all of our deals, I insist we use our broker because I trust him like I trust with my life.
I know before the rules, like you can shop with any lender, but now once the lender starts working with your file, they're the ones who go to the field.
Yeah, so what we're able to do is there's a few brokers that can still work with them. They're called correspondent brokers. And because they have such a high success rate and they know what they're doing, they're still able to shop multiple lenders. The lenders will submit the file for them. So that's who we work with because the guy I work with, he does over $1 billion of approvals a year. And he also knows how to, let's say, color around the edges of the lines, like nothing against the law, but he knows how to push it. Whereas what I find is if you use the brokers who work for the bank, they're just an employee. They're not incentivized by a commission. They're not hungry. Like we did a bunch of deals with National Bank because one of our builders had an in-house relationship with them. Disaster, because the guy was like, didn't give a shit. He probably just makes $100K a year, whether he does loans or not. When we work with our broker, he's aggressive. He'll do whatever it takes. Like I've seen him go out when CMHC didn't believe rents in a neighborhood. He went out and knocked on other doors, called other landlords, and got their leases so that he could prove to CMHC the rents are really there, right? Like that's what you want. You want a guy that will do whatever it takes to get the deal done. He's out of Edmonton, but he does all of Alberta. He does some deals with me in Ontario too and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, we've done deals with Peak, but now Peak Hill is one of the ones that raised the bond spreads. They went from about 0.8 to 1.8. And if we couldn't have, I'll be honest, if we weren't able to secure our own lender for this, then all the small deals were dead, unless people want 5% interest. So like it was literally last week, we were able to finalize this deal. Like we were shitting our pants. We were like, and no one else has this. So like, it's kind of a unique feature that we basically have like a blanket approval with this guy that he will never charge more than 95 basis point spread. And on bigger loans, we can get down even to 60 basis points. So I also tell people, sometimes it's better to go bigger, even bring a partner, because you'll get a better interest rate, right? Like the project might be the same. We can do an 8-plex, or we can put 2 8-plexes together, give you a 16. If you have a buddy, do the 16 because I'll get you a lower interest rate. Because the lenders just generally, as I said, it's the same work for them to loan $1 million and 10 million, but they're making the same interest. They'd rather do the 10 million because they still have to send out your letters every year. They have to have an administrator look at the file. So like at $1 million, if they're making 1%, that's only 10,000 a year. It's not a lot of money to deal with a file. They want to have loans that are bigger. 10 million bucks, they get 100 grand a year. So they really are like getting harder on the small loan. Not that they want to prove it, they're just going higher rates. It's not, well, international money won't count at all. So what we do is we have foreign buyers who buy, they work with a Canadian. And when they have a company, the Canadian is at least 51% of the company. The Canadian has to be the net worth. And the liquidity, the foreign guy can put the deposits up. Right? So I'm not going to tell you what to do, but what I'm saying is, if you're a Canadian and you're a foreign guy and you trust each other, then you transfer your money to him so he can show the requirements in the bank. Right? But I didn't know what happened. Absolutely. So it actually goes quite because some people think about how much money you're getting. Why we want to buy $4% they buy $1,000 what I also encourage a lot of buyers to do go in one day because the profit is 5%. You put in 2.5%. You get 2.5% back. You only have it do that. So deposit's 5%. You go to your buyer and you say, "I'll split it with you. I believe in this product." Right? You're going to be putting in 2.5%. They put in 2.5%. You get 2.5% commission. You're ending up with $0 in the deal, and you own half. Do that 10 times in a row, and you're retired. Right? So like a lot of our agents will buy halfway. Right? Right. Now they do believe you're putting your money out there. Even though you're getting your money back as commission, you're still putting that money in because it's commission you could have gone and done other stuff with. But we can also do those deals in a way that minimizes taxes. Because we can pay you as like a development consultant instead of an agent if it's your own deal, and then we can put that money right back into the company, so you're kind of you're only paying like corporate tax of like 10% instead of income. So it can be very good. That's what I do when I buy them. I mean, it's like you're paying yourself, but you're doing it in a way where you're ending up with less money in the deal and more mortgage. Right? If I buy one, I'm paying 2.5% back to myself, so I'm only in for 2.5%.
Can you mix like commercial and
yes. So there's maximum ratios. You can have CMHC is okay up to 20% of the square footage being commercial and 20% of the revenue from the building being commercial. They allow it because typically, you build an apartment building, you might have to put retail on the ground. I have one project right now in Beaumont. It's a nice little package. It's a 39-unit apartment building with about 12,000 square feet of commercial plus 17 towns. It's 22 million, and you can do it as that, or you can convert the main floor to residential also. The thing is, with commercial, they don't give you the same amount of value. So if you do a commercial, you end up at 90-10 all day. If you made it all residential, you get 95-5. However, commercial cash flows is crazy. So if you can afford it, 90-10 with the commercial is crazy good because commercial prints. And that area needs commercial. They don't have any grocery stores or convenience stores or anything. So like I would advise if a guy can do it, definitely go that way.
Question here, you said that 25% should be below the market rate.
Correct.
But if you can be 30% below the market rate and the cover that 5% from commercial, that work out.
I want to interrupt you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so like
I'm thinking the cash flow thing, which we
yeah, but they only care about 25%. They don't care about any more. There's no advantage for doing more. Yeah. Yeah. Price is the price. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, and they're selling, especially these little ones, like they're selling very rapidly. And I also remind people, it's like, I know people like to negotiate, they like to haggle, it feels good to me, but like, let me just go here. Say you change the price from 1.49 to 1.4. Right, remember, you're only putting 5% of the deal. So your down payment's gonna change like $200, and the mortgage is gonna change like barely. So like really, because it's so much mortgage, you can't really make a big difference. If anything, what I see more people doing is if there's enough, they'll raise the price and then ask the builder. The goal really should be to have as little money in the project as possible and get as much back. Because would you rather make 12,000 cash flow and have 5% of the deal? Or would you rather get all your money back and make 6,000 cash flow and you have $0 in, then you can go buy another one, and another one, and another one. And then I had done deals where they literally raised the price. Get the builder to a side agreement, says 35,000 back, I'll give you 50,000 back.
These products have outer sides of Eglinton and Turnkey.
We have a mixture, so we don't really have anything right in downtown, but we have stuff that's like very close, like Lenora, which is like 10 minutes from downtown, probably call it like a Yonge and Eglinton type of neighborhood. And we have other stuff that's way out in the suburbs and stuff that's in the middle. We generally avoid downtown because the land prices are higher and the vacancy rates are actually higher in downtown. Whereas like middle areas kind of are the best. It's like, if you think of it in Toronto, our main target is like Yonge and Eglinton to Richmond Hill. That's kind of like the zone where we can build it and get the land as quickly as possible. We put all the addresses.
There was one developer,
And we give like at the end of the day, look, it's a rental, it's not your house. You can either buy in a neighborhood that's slightly more expensive, or you buy in a neighborhood that's slightly cheaper. The rents kind of match the price, right? It's like you can pay twice as much money to buy something in Yorkville, you get more rent. You can buy something in Jane and Finch, it's cheaper, you'll get less rent, but the ratios kind of work out the same. The guys who own the Maple Leaf, I don't think they're complaining, right? Like, building doesn't have to be in a wealthy neighborhood to make you money. All that matters is what price you're paying versus what rents you get. I don't give a shit where it is. If the vacancy's low, the rents are high, and the price is low, that's all that matters to me. I don't live there, right? $100 feet. Generally on these smaller ones, we're working off of like starting from a semi-detached home or a townhouse or something like that. Yeah. There's no minimum size. I'm sure there's a minimum size by building, which is probably like 250 square feet. I don't think you can go 150, but studio units and those bigger buildings. But also remember, in Alberta, people are not being jammed in shoeboxes like in Toronto. So like a studio in Alberta will be like 400 square feet.
I'm from Alberta.
Yeah.
I'm not just for I work with the city. City wants.
So they want to make micro suites.
So there are already existing micro suites with common washroom.
Oh, so it's boarding houses.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they are mostly that with the tenants. You get your rent directly from the city.
There are ways to use CMHC for rooming homes. The requirements are different, and I'm honestly not an expert. I can do the research, you know, because you can use CMHC for a lot of types of rentals. Like it's available for rooming homes, and another area that makes a lot of money is LWs. I just don't know about it. I do what I know, right? So I know one guy that's making absolutely silly in retirement homes because Alberta will prop you up and give you a grant to build a retirement home. But I don't know how to operate a retirement home, so I have no idea what I'm doing.
What is the first term for the rooming house?
The what?
The first term for
Yeah.
common washroom and
That'll be a rooming house. A rooming house.
a rooming house.
Yeah, so if you go on CMHC's website, they say rooming houses can be done. There's different requirements. I just have to look into it.
One thing that the good thing about it, your damage, your rent,
It's all paid by
it's all paid by the city. You're a single
You have
tenant.
zero risk, basically,
Yes.
and every single month they're giving you a rent.
And every time the vacancy is high, the moment somebody is, like those that clean up and everything is keep streamlined. They don't have you check it and then they have a list.
Right. So then maybe the next thing, I mean, I'll look at it. I just don't have to know. I love the, I think the ratio is definitely a provision in there.
And that was one thing. The second thing is it not be used for hostels or things.
No, it cannot be short term. So even like, it can't be furnished, right? Like no student housing, nothing. If they catch you doing don't pull your certificate, okay. So it's like you don't want to bite the hand that feeds. I don't have any cards on me, but I can give you my my WhatsApp to scan. Hold on a minute.
I want, especially looking at the Romanian hosting, that's a big problem. Even in Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the guys in Toronto that converted their hotels and they all made a fortune, right? It's just I only do what I am an expert on.
It is 6,000 a day. All the buyers go together.
Correct.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's not even just CMHC, any commercial lending, they charge you fees. It's all, and they basically say to you, as soon as you get your approval, you owe whatever, right? It won't always be that number. That's the worst case. So the bank might say, we want 1% fee. The broker might say, I want 0.5% to 1%, right? You pay that out of your pocket. And then at closing, we've inflated the price. The builder will give you a check back to cover that. Right? You don't have to do that. You can just pay it if you want and not have it in the mortgage, but why would you want to pay it out of pocket when it's barely costing you anything? The goal in these deals is always to have as little money in the deal as possible. All those extra fees that exist, we want to cover them in the mortgage. And the thing is, for some silly reason, the banks and the CMHC don't want to roll that in. Like they roll in the the CMHC premium, just like on a regular loan. But for some reason, they say, no, you have to pay this out of pocket. We want it, it's like I don't know why, right? So you pay that out of pocket, but then you get reimbursed on closing, so you end up paying.
There was a talk I heard with PKO. They were saying that there's a 12-month after stabilization that you can refinance. Is that true?
There's no fixed time. It really just depends on what actually makes sense, right? And as I explained, like you can't really go back to them. If we get you an appraisal at 1.64, and the day after closing, you come with an appraisal at 1.75, why is it 100?
So you don't have to actually wait a year after stabilization.
It's whenever it makes sense, right? So generally, it's not going to make sense in the first 6 months. So whether it's 6 months, 12 months, a year, you just have to have a good case, right? Oh, look at the market, it went up a lot, or we predict that
We find it even first existing.
So you're talking about
You get it funded.
You're talking about rental achievement. So that's what I was talking about, rental achievement. So CMHC reserves the right to ask for rental achievement at their discretion. Rental achievement means we want to see you actually hit these numbers. We're only going to give you 75%, and the other 20% we're going to hold back until we see the number. It is discretionary if they have. Right? Where we've only seen it happen is when we push these numbers really hard. As I mentioned on the last group we did, 2 got rental achievement hits. One of them we knew would happen beforehand. The other one we were shocked it happened, and when we escalated the case, it got removed. So as long as you're we're pre-leasing right now. We're scared of so that lending is plus the equity. I will say the registry. Zero liability. What? Because it's not your loan. If it's your loan, if we're doing a construction draw, then the title's conveyed to it. You're basically acting like a general. Higher risk for you. The advantage is you can usually take out your money during construction by inflating the draws. Like the one I bought today, 24 units. I'm doing a construction project, like the price, and I can get all my equity out in the first week. So like 90 days, I'll put in a deposit. 90 days,
They're really, really nice.
Yeah, it's just a regular pre-cons contract. If it's a construction draw, then it's two contracts. It's a land purchase agreement and it is a construction contract, and they are intertwined that both parties. Yeah, if you can just scan my thing. I moved right in one. I have a couple projects. I wish I was, but it's too much work. As I said, being a builder is a lot. Everyone thinks builders are rich. They're just so you do partner in the business as well? Not on these projects. I have my own project in Toronto that I'm developing for a long time ago. But if I could go back in time and not do it, I wish I never did. The other thing in Alberta, if you actually want to be a builder, most projects get approved, like raw land to fully approved, building permits ready 90 days. 90 days. In Toronto, you're fighting the city for 3 years. Like, talk about not being open for business, right?
Wild just sent you a message. So I said, send me a contract for the purchase of one of the properties.
Absolutely.
Do you know simple investment?
I think I've seen that email. Yeah.
I'm Jacob from Century.
Thank you.
Sorry, what's your name? I'm Jacob. What is the
Oh, yeah. So they do this lending. They basically can have 3 pieces to the loan, and you can use them all or you can not. So there's the land, the construction, and the actual conversion to a mortgage at the end. You can use all of it because the original intention of this program was not to sell them to someone else. The original intention was, you want to be a builder, we're going to help you buy the land, we're going to help you do the construction, and then at the end you convert it to mortgage. Most of the deals we do, because we have a separate builder, you're just getting the mortgage at the end, just like a regular pre-construction. But some deals, we will have, basically you apply for the land and construction loan as well. In that case, once you're approved, the builder will actually sell you the land, right? So in those cases, it's not a contract for final houses, it's a purchase agreement of the land and a construction contract. In that case, you're taking on the construction loan, the builder's basically acting as a contractor for you. The advantage of that is that we can usually inflate the price of it, and during every month the builder does work, and then they get a draw from the loan, right?
So my friend does in Alberta.
Right. So what we do is, if we inflate the price, then in each draw you can recuperate your deposits, and by a few draws in, you have $0 in the deal. You're free rolling.
So we take the deposits.
You want to finance it, right? Then you won't make your money.
For 1.5 million.
Well, one of these little ones will not be construction. The builder just builds. So it would be just close. It's usually for bigger projects because there's so much more paperwork on construction loans. No one wants to hassle on it. Like 4 or 5 million. Most of them are going to be bigger. It's just because, like, obviously the money's cheaper on these than the builder's own financing, but like there's so much paperwork to do construction draw loans that on for such a small thing that like it's better to do it builders.
100 in cash.
One half is 3-bed, one half is 4-bed. Yeah, we can actually get higher. But we're just these are the numbers CMHC wants to see based off the rental report, and especially now CMHC is very, very tight. We can post these are the rents they want. Real life, we probably do that number. It depends if there's garage. The garage is built in, so it's literally a separate structure. Sometimes it's like a plug garage or whatever. It's like same thing over here, right? That's why the rent's higher, right? Because again, who wants to live in the basement? Yeah.
Hey, you know, when you said it, we all this interested in the condo here. How are you, brother?
Good to see you, bro. The projects that you bought, both of them are the ones that second one you're buying. You're strictly expecting to Edmonton for your time.
Correct.
Reason being because of the rate.
I see more upside in Edmonton right now, and also it's very hard to find deals in Calgary right now that are good. The reason is because people, the smart money is already out of Edmonton now, or Calgary. The dumb money is going out of Calgary because prices have gone up so much. I see people selling these in Calgary at prices that are fucking crazy, bro. Like we did a few deals in Calgary over the last 6 months, and I'm only finding the best. Like, we sold one to Sam O'Gary's team, 2.9 million for an 8-plex. I see other guys advertising an 8-plex in the same neighborhood for 3.5 million because they don't know. The Toronto buyer doesn't know. If you buy $3.5 million 8-plex in Calgary, you're 15% down all day. It will not pay for it. You're fucked. You're absolutely fucked. Like I'm selling one for 2.9, bro. You know, like. I see, like, for example, I had a 10-plex coming, 3.75 million. There's other guys pitching 10-plexes at 4.5 million. You're fucked. I'm telling you, I papered their deals at 4.5. I'm like, are you crazy? Like, you're 15% down, but you're advertising at 3.5 because they don't know anything. And they don't know who will buy. They only care about selling it, just like I care about the buyers having a good outcome. So I won't sell something where the buyer's going to get fucked, right? Same thing like in Edmonton. Guys don't know what they're doing. They're selling big plexes like 2.7, 2.8, 2.9 million. You're fucked. Right now, the rule of thumb for Edmonton is about 300 per door. If you're at 300 per door, we're golden because I can get a price at least 330. You got 10% upside. Obviously, it varies by neighborhood. Neighborhoods, we go up to 350 a door.
Yeah.
But the general rule of thumb is 300K a door. If you can buy something at or around 300 a door, you're safe, right? Like, we're at like a good price would be like 380, 375. So like again, the 10-plex I have 3.75 million, whereas other guys are trying to pitch them at 4.5.
But the math's
450 a
gonna
door.
pencil out at 375 or no? And Calgary too.
Because even though the rents come down a bit, they're still pretty high, right? But to put in perspective, this is the same builder I sold it before. 6 months ago, we were able to do similar, basic copy and paste product at 3.4, and now they want 3.75. And like they were trying for 3.9, I told them I'm not going to sell it. At 3.75, I can make it work. 3.9, I don't want to do it. I won't do it. At 3.75, at 3.4, they're insane. And also when we were selling them back then, bond rates were higher. Of course, the bonds come back up again, but I really think that's temporary. I think that's a Trump effect. Like, because the bonds are totally disconnected from the bank rate now. That can't happen forever. I literally, every time you see in the tweet that Trump wants to make Canada the 51st state, and then the bonds go up 10 points, right? And then he doesn't tweet for 2 days, and the bonds go down 10 points. So, like, if you can predict Trump's tweets, you can, like, trade bonds and make money. Like, I don't know how to do it, but I do believe that's transitory because interest rates keep dropping, and I think bond rates should be like 2.75 right now. So it doesn't matter for a buyer today because they're not getting approved today. I'm pretty confident, right? And as long as we have a ceiling rate, what we do is you can rate lock, where basically you put an extra 0.5% down at the beginning, and it will give you a maximum rate. It doesn't make this a refundable thing because that way the bank can go and get the bonds now, so that they know you're going to do business with them. It's like a deposit, right? It's again, you get that money back. So, but you put down an extra $10,000, and now you know your maximum rate is 4.3. But if it goes down, you get the lower rate. So, like, anyone with a brain will do the rate lock. Like, why wouldn't you, right? You know your absolute worst case scenario and only get better. Like, unless rates are just dropping day after day, but even then, why not just do the rate lock? It's not, you're not paying that. It's a temporary deposit.
And when the government changes, you think this program will be effective?
I don't think so. Polyab is very bullish on housing. If anything, my opinion on Polyab is he'll probably tell the CMHC to get its head out of his ass and stop changing the program every 2 months. The biggest problem I see with it, these guys are panickers. Every time the program gets used a lot, they freak out, they change the rules. But like, house building is not something you decide in 5 minutes. You have to do years of planning. So if you're changing a program every 3 months, how can anyone reasonably plan ahead? It's very like childish of them to do that, right? But as I said, this program, who knows? They could shut it down any day. So like, that's why I'm buying as many as I can now. Get it while the going's good. Because if you get approved today at 95.5, you're golden. But tomorrow they might say we're doing 90-10 only, and then that's it. He also said he would approve GST on all homes. So the other funny thing, all these homes are GST rebate. He says, I didn't even